The Garden of Broken Dreams. The void gardens of Kepler 442 bits had once been the crown jewel of the ethereal collective, a place where the galaxy's most advanced psychic species came to heal their minds and commune with the deepest mysteries of consciousness. The gardens stretched across continents, filled with plants that could read thoughts, crystalline formations that amplified mental energy, and pools of liquid that reflected not light, but memories and dreams. That was before the Cascade event. Commander Thale Meridian stood on the observation deck of the research vessel Mindseeker, his 6 arms crossed in a gesture of deep concern. His people, the Cephalari, were renowned throughout the galaxy for their mental discipline and psychic abilities. They could read minds across star systems, move objects with pure thought, and even glimpse possible futures through meditation. Yet the sight of Kepler 442 bits filled him with a dread so profound that his secondary brain had begun stress-producing chemicals to protect his sanity. Status report on the human researcher, Thale commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had led scientific expeditions for over 3 centuries. Dr. Xen Quillen, a crystalline silicoid whose body structure allowed for perfect mental clarity, consulted the quantum sensors with obvious distress. The light patterns within his translucent form flickered rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation among his people. Commander, the human has been on the surface for 18 hours. She established camp directly in the center of what our scans indicate is the most psychically active region of the gardens. Thale felt his tertiary heart skip a beat. The most psychically active region was where the Cascade event had begun. It was the epicenter of a psychic storm so intense that it had driven the entire ethereal collective to madness in a matter of hours. The survivors spoke of nightmares made manifest, of their own thoughts turning against them, of reality itself becoming unstable and hostile. "What is her current status?" Thale asked, though he dreaded the answer. Dr. Quillen's internal light patterns shifted to deep blue, indicating confusion rather than distress. "According to our long-range sensors, she appears to be sleeping, Commander." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. The research vessel carried representatives from 12 different species, all of them experts in psychic phenomena and mental health. Every one of them understood the implications of what they had just heard. "Sleeping," Thale repeated slowly, "in the center of the void gardens, during peak psychic storm activity." "Yes, Commander. Her vital signs indicate deep REM sleep. Brain activity shows normal dream patterns, not the chaotic neural storms we've documented in every other being that has attempted contact with the surface." Thale turned to the view screen, which showed the planet's surface through a combination of optical and psychic sensors. The void gardens were a nightmare landscape of twisted plant life that moved with malevolent intelligence, crystalline formations that sang with the voices of the mad, and pools that reflected scenes of horror and despair. Psychic energy storms raged across the surface like hurricanes of pure mental anguish, turning the very air into a weapon against consciousness itself. And somewhere in the middle of that hellscape, Dr. Elena Vasquez was taking a nap. "Get me her file again," Thale commanded. The main display shifted to show the personnel record of a human woman in her early 30s. She had brown hair tied back in a practical ponytail, wore simple field clothes, and carried what appeared to be standard botanical research equipment. Her credentials were impressive but not extraordinary. Doctorate in Xenobotany from Earth University, specialization in psychoactive plant species, 15 years of field research on various frontier worlds. Dr. Elena Vasquez, Thale read aloud. Human, age 34, born on Earth. Previous assignments include the carnivorous forests of Proxima Centauri, the hallucinogenic jungles of Wolf 359, and the empathic moss colonies of Gliese 667c. He paused at the last entry. Note here says she spent 2 years living among the empathic moss colonies, successfully established communication protocols with a hive mind plant species that had driven 17 previous research teams to suicide. Dr. Quillen's light patterns flickered with what might have been curiosity. Commander, perhaps humans have natural resistance to psychic phenomena. Or perhaps, interrupted Science Officer Krell, a tall insectoid mantary, whose compound eyes could see in 17 different spectrums. They simply don't understand the danger they're in. Phil considered both possibilities as he watched the sensor readings from the planet's surface. Dr. Vasquez had landed in a small shuttle 18 hours ago, carrying nothing more than camping equipment, research tools, and what appeared to be several thermoses of coffee. She had set up her camp with casual efficiency, as if she were preparing for a weekend in a pleasant park rather than entering the most psychically hostile environment known to galactic science. Commander, Dr. Quillen spoke up again, his internal lights now pulsing with excitement. I'm detecting movement around the humans' campsite. The view screen switched to a close-up view of Elena's camp. Her small tent was surrounded by the twisted plant life of the Void Gardens, but something was different. The plants, which normally writhed with aggressive malevolence, were perfectly still. The crystalline formations that usually sang with the voices of the mad were silent. Even the psychic energy storms seemed to be avoiding her immediate area. It's as if, Dr. Quillen said in wonder, the gardens are leaving her alone. Or studying her, Krell added ominously. As they watched, Elena emerged from her tent looking refreshed and alert. She wore simple khaki pants and a cotton shirt, carried a thermos of coffee in one hand and a notebook in the other. She moved through the nightmare landscape with the casual confidence of someone taking a morning walk through a familiar garden. Patch me through to her communicator, Thale commanded. The view screen flickered and showed Elena's face. She was sitting cross-legged next to a pool that reflected scenes of cosmic horror, but she seemed completely unbothered by the images of terror swirling just meters away from her. Good morning, Commander Meridian, Elena said with a bright smile. Beautiful morning down here. The bioluminescent patterns in the plant life are absolutely fascinating. Thale felt his primary brain struggle to process what he was seeing. Dr. Vasquez, you are currently sitting in the most psychically dangerous location in known space. The mental energy readings around your position should have driven you insane within minutes of arrival. Elena took a sip of her coffee and nodded thoughtfully. Yes, the psychic activity is quite intense. Very complex patterns, much more sophisticated than anything I've encountered before. The plants here aren't just psychoactive. They're genuinely telepathic. It's remarkable. Dr. Vasquez, Krell interjected, his compound eyes reflecting light patterns of disbelief. The last research team that attempted to study the Void Gardens was composed of the galaxy's most powerful psychics. They were found catatonic within 6 hours, their minds completely shattered. Elena considered this information while making notes in her field journal. Were they trying to shield themselves from the psychic effects? The question caught the alien officers off guard. Dr. Quillen's light patterns shifted to confused yellow. Of course, they were shielding themselves. Standard procedure when encountering hostile psychic phenomena. Ah, Elena said, as if that explained everything. That was probably the problem. See, when you encounter a new ecosystem, especially one with intelligent or semi-intelligent components, the worst thing you can do is approach it defensively. The local life forms interpret that as hostile intent. She gestured around at the twisted landscape with obvious appreciation. These plants aren't attacking me because I'm not trying to fight them. I'm just here to observe and learn. They can sense that through the psychic connection. Thale felt his worldview beginning to shift in ways that made him deeply uncomfortable. Dr. Vasquez, are you saying that the Void Gardens are not hostile? Elena's expression became more serious, but not fearful. Commander, there's no such thing as a truly hostile ecosystem. Every environment, no matter how dangerous it appears, exists in balance. The plants here have been traumatized by something, probably the same event that drove the ethereal collective away. They're not attacking visitors out of malice. They're responding to what they perceive as threats. She stood up and walked closer to one of the twisted plant forms, a massive flowering vine that pulsed with dark energy. As she approached, the plant's aggressive posture relaxed, its thorns retracting and its flowers opening to reveal patterns of surprising beauty. "Look at this," Elena said, her voice filled with wonder. "This is a healing plant. Its psychic emissions aren't meant to cause harm. They're designed to repair damaged mental pathways. But it's been alone and afraid for so long that it doesn't remember how to heal anymore. It only knows how to defend itself." The bridge crew watched in stunned silence as Elena reached out and gently touched the plant's main stem. Instead of the expected psychic assault that should have destroyed her mind instantly, the plant responded by shifting its coloration from threatening black to a soft, warm blue. "Dr. Vasquez," Thale said quietly, "what you're doing should be impossible." Elena smiled and returned to her notebook, making detailed sketches of the plant's transformation. "Commander, humans have been living with dangerous plants for our entire evolutionary history. We learned early that the best way to survive in a hostile environment isn't to fight everything that might hurt you. It's to understand what each thing needs and find a way to coexist." She gestured around the gardens with obvious affection. "This place was created as a sanctuary for healing minds. The plants remember that purpose, even if they've forgotten how to fulfill it safely. They want to help, they just need someone to show them that it's safe to do so." As if responding to her words, more of the twisted plant life began to shift and change. Thorns retracted, aggressive postures relaxed, and the constant background hum of psychic hostility began to fade into something that almost sounded like music. "My plan," Elena continued, "is to spend the next few weeks here, learning their communication patterns and helping them remember their original purpose. I think with the right approach, the Void Gardens could be restored to their original function as a healing center." She took another sip of coffee and looked directly at the camera with an expression of calm confidence. After all, every garden needs a gardener who understands that even the most dangerous-looking plants usually just need water, sunlight, and a little bit of patience. The communication channel closed, leaving the bridge of the Moonseeker in contemplative silence. Outside the viewports, the Void Gardens continued their slow transformation from nightmare landscape to something that might, with time and understanding, become beautiful again. The Gardener's Gift. 3 weeks had passed since Dr. Elena Vasquez had first set foot in the Void Gardens, and the transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Commander Thale Meridian stood on the observation deck, watching through the viewscreen as areas of the planet's surface that had been twisted by psychic trauma for decades slowly returned to their original beauty. Where once there had been crystalline formations that screamed with the voices of the mad, now there were singing crystals that harmonized in complex melodies that seemed to actually heal the minds of those who heard them. The pools that had reflected scenes of horror now showed peaceful memories and hopeful dreams. Most remarkably, the plant life that had attacked any psychic presence with murderous intent now reached out to visitors with gentle curiosity. "Daily report, Dr. Quillen," Thale commanded, though he never grew tired of hearing the updates. The silicoid's light patterns were now a steady, warm gold, indicating contentment and wonder. "Commander, Dr. Vasquez has successfully established communication with 97% of the garden's plant species. The psychic energy readings have stabilized at levels that our psychologists classify as therapeutic rather than dangerous." Thale nodded, still marveling at the transformation. "Any word from the Ethereal Collective?" "Yes, Commander. 3 of their survivors have requested permission to visit the surface. They want to see if the gardens can help heal the psychological trauma they suffered during the Cascade event. It was unprecedented. The Ethereal Collective had been the most psychically advanced species in the galaxy before the disaster that destroyed their homeworld. For them to even consider returning to a place that had driven their entire civilization to madness showed just how completely Elena had changed the nature of the Void Gardens. "Patch me through to Dr. Vasquez," Thale requested. The view screen showed Elena sitting in what had once been the most psychically hostile area of the gardens. She was surrounded by plants that seemed to glow with inner light, and the air around her shimmered with what their sensors identified as pure healing energy. She looked exactly as she had 3 weeks ago, practical clothes, notebook in hand, thermos of coffee nearby. But the environment around her had been transformed into something that looked like paradise. "Good morning, Commander," Elena said with her usual cheerful smile. "I was just having a conversation with what I started calling the memory moss. It's been showing me the history of the gardens before the Cascade event. Absolutely fascinating stuff." Behind her, a patch of moss that covered several square meters pulsed with gentle blue light, creating patterns that somehow conveyed complex emotional concepts directly to the viewer's mind. Instead of the overwhelming psychic assault that such contact would have meant weeks ago, the sensation was warm and welcoming. "Dr. Vasquez," Thale began, "representatives from the Ethereal Collective have asked permission to visit the surface. Do you think the gardens are ready for that?" Elena's expression became thoughtful as she considered the question. She turned to consult with a nearby plant that resembled a massive flowering tree, its blossoms shifting through colors that seemed to communicate complex ideas. "The gardens say they would welcome the return of their original caretakers," Elena reported after a moment. "But they want assurance that the visitors won't try to force healing. The plants have learned to be very gentle in their approach, but they need the same gentleness in return." She stood up and walked toward a crystalline formation that had once driven research teams insane with its psychic screaming. Now it hummed with a melody so beautiful that several crew members on the Mindseeker had reported feeling their stress and anxiety melt away just from hearing it through the communication system. "The key," Elena explained, "is understanding that healing can't be forced. These plants spent decades in trauma, attacking anything that came near because they were afraid and in pain. They needed someone to sit with them, listen to their story, and help them remember that they were safe." She reached out and placed her palm against the crystal, which responded by shifting its hum to a harmony that perfectly complemented Elena's own biorhythm. "It's the same principle that works with any traumatized being, whether they're human, alien, or plant. You have to approach with patience, empathy, and no agenda other than offering comfort." Dr. Quillen leaned forward, his internal lights pulsing with curiosity. "Dr. Vasquez, how did you know to approach them this way? This level of psychic therapy is beyond anything in our medical databases." Elena chuckled softly. "Commander, I grew up on a farm in rural Mexico. My grandmother was a curandera, a traditional healer. She taught me that every living thing has its own way of communicating pain and its own way of accepting comfort. The language might be different, but the principles are the same whether you're dealing with a sick chicken or a traumatized psychic plant." She gestured around the transformed gardens with obvious affection. "Plus, humans have been gardening for thousands of years. We understand that the most beautiful gardens aren't created by dominating nature, but by working with it. You have to listen to what each plant needs and create conditions where it can thrive." Phil felt something shift in his understanding of humanity's place in the galactic community. "Dr. Vasquez, what you've accomplished here will change how we approach psychic trauma treatment throughout the galaxy." Elena's smile widened. "Actually, Commander, I think it might change how we approach a lot of things. The gardens have been teaching me about their original purpose, and it's much more sophisticated than anyone realized." She led the camera view toward a section of the gardens that seemed to pulse with organized energy patterns. "This isn't just a healing center for individual minds. It's designed to help entire species work through collective trauma, resolve conflicts between different types of consciousness, and even facilitate communication between life forms that normally couldn't interact." The implications hit Thale like a revelation. "You mean this could be used for diplomatic purposes, helping different species understand each other at a fundamental level?" "Exactly," Elena said, making notes in her journal while a nearby plant seemed to peer over her shoulder with obvious interest. "The Ethereal Collective built this place as the ultimate therapy center, designed to help beings from across the galaxy heal from psychological wounds and learn to communicate across species barriers." She paused to give the curious plant an affectionate pat, which made it rustle with what could only be described as pleasure. The Cascade event that drove them away was actually a misunderstanding. They were trying to create a direct mind link between representatives of 12 different species, but they approached it too aggressively. The gardens got overwhelmed and went into defensive mode. Elena looked directly at the camera with an expression of gentle wisdom. But now that they've learned to be more careful, and now that I've helped them process the trauma from that experience, they're ready to try again. This time with proper preparation and respect for everyone's boundaries. The communication channel remained open as Elena continued her work, moving through the gardens with the easy confidence of someone completely at home in her environment. Plants leaned toward her as she passed, and even the crystalline formations seemed to orient themselves in her direction, as if seeking her attention and approval. "Commander," Dr. Quillen said quietly, "the energy readings from the gardens are unlike anything we've ever recorded. It's as if the entire ecosystem is operating as a single, unified consciousness focused on healing and growth." Thel nodded, watching Elena interact with the transformed landscape. And she did all of this simply by treating traumatized plants the same way she would treat any traumatized being, with patience, empathy, and respect. On the surface below, Elena had sat down next to one of the memory pools, which now reflected scenes of hope and joy instead of horror and despair. She was sketching something in her notebook while carrying on what appeared to be a conversation with a flowering vine that had wrapped itself gently around her shoulders. "Dr. Vasquez," Thel called through the communication system, "what are your recommendations for the Ethereal Collective's visit?" Elena looked up from her notes with the expression of someone who had been hoping for that exact question. "I'd suggest starting small. Maybe 1 or 2 representatives, people who are naturally calm and open-minded. The gardens are excited about the possibility of reconnecting with their original purpose, but they want to make sure they do it right this time." She gestured around the peaceful landscape with obvious pride. "We've set up several areas specifically designed for gentle psychic contact. The plants have learned to modulate their healing energy so it won't overwhelm sensitive minds. It should be perfectly safe for anyone who approaches with good intentions and an open heart." Elena stood up and stretched, looking remarkably refreshed for someone who had spent 3 weeks camping in what was once considered the most dangerous psychic environment in the galaxy. "Actually, Commander, I think this could be the beginning of something amazing. The gardens could become a center for galactic healing, diplomacy, and understanding. A place where any species can come to work through conflicts, heal from trauma, and learn to communicate across the deepest differences." She smiled that warm, confident smile that had become familiar to everyone aboard the Mindseeker. After all, every good garden needs not just a gardener, but visitors who can appreciate its beauty and learn from its wisdom. As the communication ended, Commander Thale found himself looking at Elena Vasquez with something approaching awe. She had taken a place of nightmare and transformed it into a haven of healing, not through advanced technology or powerful psychic abilities, but through simple human empathy and the wisdom that came from understanding that every living thing, no matter how damaged or dangerous it might seem, ultimately wanted the same things: safety, understanding, and the chance to grow toward the light. In the depths of space, watching over the void gardens that were void no longer, the crew of the Mindseeker bore witness to something that would change the galaxy forever. The proof that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe wasn't strength or knowledge, but the simple human gift of knowing how to tend a garden with love.